Hi, I'm Geoffrey, host of Ahead of the Curve. Welcome to another show. Today, I have two incredible ladies on the show. We're going to be getting into a really awesome conversation about law and when the different IP fears might hold you back from being able to go forward and do what you truly love. We also spoke about how to protect yourself with or without the need or the use of a lawyer. So there's a lot of things that you can do with or without a lawyer. We also spoke about the different types of protections that are available to you and when you need to apply those to your practices or to your business. So take a look at the show. It was a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoy it too. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Ahead of the Curve show. Today, I've got Wendy Heimann on and Mishawn Nolan from Nolan Heimann LLC.
Heimann.
Or LLC. It's LLP.
It's LLP. Right? And my last name, I'd like to leave I'm a He-Man, but it's Heimann.
It's Heimann?
Yes.
It's not He-Man?
Not He-Man.
You gotta be big muscles.
Exactly. I used to have muscles. I'm a drummer, but in this COVID crisis, I haven't been drumming, so my drummer arms are turning into old lady lawyer at her desk arms.
Oh,
it's very sad.
That is very sad. Well, welcome to the show, ladies. I'm so grateful to have you guys here with me today, and we're going to cover some really interesting grounds, I hope, over the course of the next hour, talking about a lot of hot topics that have been kind of circulating over the past few weeks, especially inside our industry, about IP, intellectual property and intellectual property law, what people can do, what people can't do to protect themselves there. What trade secrets are, some patent stuff, and also talk about some of the more personal stuff that you guys have also been working on within your firm. So Wendy, could you, let's start with you. Could you give us a little bit of a background of kind of where you got started and where you're from and how you got into law and where you are now?
Sure. So I am from Chicago originally. And I always knew, I've always had this creative side. And so I always knew I wanted to be in an industry that focused on creativity and innovation. I learned fairly early on in my life that I didn't have, I didn't excel necessarily at any of a traditional creative pursuit or artistic pursuit. But what I did excel at was the ability to help my friends who were creative provide a platform or a structure or a way of looking at things or being an advocate for them. And so I decided that that was what I really wanted to do with my life, is help creators create. And make a very long story short, I was a talent agent before law school, went to law school because I was always underestimated, and I hated going into various environments feeling I wasn't being taken seriously, and I thought a law degree would help. Never really thought I'd practice law as long as I have. But I did. I got sucked in and never left. However, for a short period of time, I ran a landmark theater in Chicago called the Chicago Theater. And I was very active in theater and whatnot in Chicago. And it was there that I started working with Disney Development Corp when they were doing mixed-use real estate development. They had started in Times Square in New York, and they were interested in working in Chicago, and my theater was considered their linchpin, their anchor. Huh. And I started working with them, and I realized, wow, there's this whole professional ecosystem of people who use entertainment to create overlays to places, to motivate people to shop, have fun, rebuild urban areas and whatnot. And it was so complex and so interesting and involved so many moving parts from an entertainment perspective that I decided that's what I wanted to pursue. So when I moved out to LA, my friends thought I was going to become an agent or work in television or film production. And I decided to be in theme parks. And, people were like, okay, good career move, Wendy. But I love immersive entertainment. I always wanted to create entertainment or help people create entertainment where the guest was a part of it as opposed to watching someone else have fun. I always thought, why is Julia Roberts having fun? I want to be the one that lives the princess life or whatever it is. And so immersive entertainment.
I'm still trying, by the way. I'm still trying to live the princess life.
And so, for me, immersive entertainment, for so many reasons, not to mention the technological aspects, the emerging technologies, all that stuff, it's in my blood. I love it. And my passion is always helping to create roadmaps and a sense of structure for people who are truly creative to really create within. So that's my story in a nutshell.
That's a great story. Mishawn, how about yourself? How did you get into this crazy, chaotic industry of ours?
So Wendy and I have a similar origin story in that I was a creative as well before I went to law school.
She had a talent, though. She had a talent.
I was a dancer and a choreographer, but I was never just the creative. I was always the teacher's assistant, the director's assistant, the dance captain, the one in charge, because I never was I could never just let go and just be just creative. I have this analytical structure side of me that, just comes through.
I can relate to you there.
So I went to law school because I wanted to help people. That was why I went to law school. I wanted to help people. And then the question became, who am I going to help? And then when I looked at who do I want to work with on a daily basis? Like, what do I want to do with my life? Who do I want to be surrounded by? I love creators and innovators, and I love being part of that. I know that I am not going to devote my life to be a creative. It takes tremendous courage. It's a very hard life. And it would not allow me to fulfill the part of me that's really analytical and enjoys structure. So I realized that the best way that I could help people and stay connected to creativity and innovation was to work with people in those industries. And so from the beginning of my practice, I have been working with creators and innovators and helping them monetize their assets. And there's a huge gap between creating something and having a business. And so I've always worked with people to help them go from, I have an idea, I have a creation, I have a talent, but I want to create a business around it, and helping them navigate that, launch that, operate that, grow that. And so Wendy and I, that's what we live for.
That's what you live for, and that's what you do.
Yes, we really do. I mean, honestly, it's not an exaggeration to say that it's our oxygen. We really, I'm going to sound slightly demented, but we really do live for this stuff.
And that's actually a really good thing. I think we should all kind of live for the jobs that we work in, as opposed to work for the jobs that we live in.
Definitely.
Exactly.
So it's a good thing that you guys have found your calling and found your place. So could you give us maybe, Mishawn, could you give us a little bit of a background maybe of the law firm and how that kind of came together, and actually even how you guys met?
Yes. So I was practicing at a firm. Wendy had a firm. She was a partner with another gentleman. And we met at a networking event. And before I went to the networking event, I looked up everyone to see who was going to be there.
You're a stalker, in other words.
She was a stalker.
It was an intimate dinner, by invitation only. So it was only like 10 people. And so I looked everyone up beforehand to see who was there. And I looked up Wendy, and I was so impressed. I was like, this is who I am inside, but I am at a firm that doesn't allow me to be who I am. And so I saw who she was and her, who she represented and how she represented herself to the world. I said, I have to meet her. I have to meet her. Wendy is, very social, and she was very busy at the dinner talking to everyone. And I patiently waited my turn. It was very hard to get a hold of her, but we finally did connect. And I was incredibly blown away by her, impressed with her. I had never met another lawyer quite like her. And we both had the same passion. We're both creative and analytical at the same time. And that's very rare. And we both had this vision of how the practice of law should be practiced. And most firms don't practice this way. Most firms focus on avoiding risk, identifying,
Well, if you're in
landmarks.
the entertainment industry, you're going to be taking on risk no matter which way you go.
If you're in business,
you can't avoid it.
Right, any business, you take on risk.
Yeah.
So for most lawyers, that's what they're focused on, right? They're focused on all the bad things that could possibly happen and avoiding risk. Wendy and I had a completely different focus. Our focus was how do you maximize, how do you optimize your assets? How do you take what you have and create the most out of it? And how do you look beyond what you're doing now? And what's your strategic plan? And where do you want to go? And how can we help you get there? And that's a very different way of looking at the practice of law. And so we were aligned from the beginning on what we wanted to do.
That's fantastic.
And Geoffrey, if I can interject, we spoke just yesterday with a woman who's been CMO and CEO of some pretty prominent companies. And she identified something for us, and it was such an epiphany. She said that there's a prevention mindset and there's a promotion mindset, not just in law, but in business. And when she said that, Mishawn and I immediately said, that's what we do. We bridge the prevention mindset with the promotion mindset, because you need both, right? And typically when, as Mishawn was saying, when you think of the way people think about law, it very much feels preventive. My father, who is a self-made businessman, no high school education, minimal high school education, would say, when I went to law school, always remember, Wendy, if I listened to my lawyer, I would never get out of bed in the morning. And, that sticks with us because it's
That's
easy.
A horrible outlook.
Well, but think about it, though. How many times have you talked to people regarding legal things, and it fills you with the sense of dread and anxiety?
It's
because, so it's really important to us, and it's imbued throughout our firm. And it's not just Mishawn, it's every attorney that's at our firm. We have very much an attitude of not if, but how. Not if, but how.
I think that's really important to kind of drive in to the viewers and people that are watching as well. The importance of that, because it is something that people shy away from a lot. I know that anything that comes up legally for me in my life, I'm like, oh, here we go,
Definitely, and it's embedded in the language. Years ago, I used to teach a class of non-lawyers, and the first thing I would do is I would take a contract and I'd read through it with them. And then I would say, so you know what herein means? It means in this thing. Heretofore, whereby, all this stuff. And it's easy to get, caught up in the agita, right, of the language. But it's just been this, we've developed our own little code to almost make people feel like they can't participate in it. But it's just a language. And it's important for people who are not immersed in that language to not be intimidated by it, and just feel like, they can be in it and be in it with vigor and not fear.
Yeah. I think that's a really important, again, another very important point. And Christy actually said here, the alignment was meant to be the key point, meant to be the key point, merging the prevention mindset with the promotion mindset as a legal strategy. So I think
especially, Geoffrey, sorry for interrupting, especially when it comes to the creative arts or anything involving innovation or intellectual property, because I think, and Mishawn, I think we share this passion from an intellectual standpoint. The reason that we pursued IP wasn't just because it's inherent in creation and innovation, but there's something intrinsic about it that if you think about a loaf of bread, it's physical and it's limited. Mm-hmm. And there are only so many ways that you can slice it and feed people. But when you think about intellectual property, it's almost like gas. It's almost, and and you can blow it up and fill a room with it, or you can limit it. And that's the fascinating thing about the opportunities afforded by something intangible. And if you're smart about it, and you're smart about the way that you employ your strategy and the way you execute, identify it, and then roll it out and monetize it and whatnot, it's so exciting because you can build more than you think. And for Mishawn and me and for our firm, that's what gets us so excited, is growing, optimizing those opportunities. It's a challenge. It's exciting.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that's an important thing to kind of bring up about intellectual property and about, people being able to do things and have that outreach. I mean, we had a call yesterday, about being able to monetize some of the things that we do as creatives and figuring out creative ways to do that. And I think that would be a great thing to basically talk about as well. I just wanted to also state to the viewers that this is also just as much our show as it is yours. So please feel free to post questions in the comments, throughout the show, and we will definitely get around to those as we're carrying on the conversation. But I don't know who would host this question the best, but what would be some of the approaches at looking at, being a creative artist or being a creative, creating something very unique, and then looking at ways to be able to monetize those.
I'll let Mishawn field that. She's the master strategist.
So the first thing you want to do is you want to take an asset inventory. So you want to spend time and you want to write down all of your existing assets. Your assets include, your names, the trademarks, anything you've created, the trade secrets, which, your secret sauce, the special way you do things, your relationships, your history, where you've worked before, who your special skills. And that's your asset inventory. And you can't even begin to monetize your IP until you have a handle on your assets. Right? And then once you have your assets, obviously.
Can I interject, Mishawn?
Yeah.
No.
Sorry, we do this all the time, so sorry. By the way, I want to go back to our origin story for people out there who are thinking about partnerships or collaborations and stuff like that. Make sure your values are aligned beyond your passions and your vision. Make sure your values are aligned, because I've been very blessed to work with a woman for over 7 years, almost 8 years, with almost identical values, and it's made our decision-making process really, really efficient and fun and lovely. So I just want to throw that out there. But when you do your asset inventory, you guys are creative. Be creative. Assets can be found in places that you may not even realize. And I think it's super important to be as aggressive and creative as possible in really thinking about the sphere of your assets. They're hidden in places you may not realize. And even double check with people. Have I got everything here? Am I missing anything? Because we find that most often people leave easily more than 50% on the table of not identifying an asset.
And those assets, again, in the conversation we had yesterday, don't necessarily need to be for financial gain. I think, again, just a lot of creatives don't see the complete picture or the overall picture of the gain based on those assets that they are creating,
Exactly. So then once you have put together your assets, the next thing you want to do is you want to really dig down into your soul and figure out who you are. Yeah. Who you are, what you have to offer the world, what is unique about how you approach things, your history, your authentic offering to the world, right? Then what you have to do is identify the needs of your customers, the needs that you identify that you can solve. And then what you do is essentially you triangulate the three things. What are your assets? Who are you? How are you unique? and what is the need you're trying to solve. And when you figure out how you take your existing assets, which may need to be modified or built upon or adjusted, but you take your existing assets, you take the need, and you take who you are as a person, and you figure out how you can uniquely solve those problems, right? And that's essentially the core essence of monetization.
And Geoffrey, if I can underscore Mishawn's point regarding taking stock of who you are and authenticity, it's a buzzword now. You know,
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, oh yeah, right, authenticity.
Is it authentic? Am I authentic?
You know, the whole
Am I
thing.
being authentic?
Well, Mishawn and I and our colleagues, we see it on the front line. This is not just a nicety or a word that people now are throwing around because it's hip or whatever. It really is common sense that when you do something that's authentic to yourself, both good and bad, you have to take stock of the things that you're not good at.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of clients who come to us with the shoulds. I'm told I should do this. My neighbor says I should be doing this. My dad says I should be doing this. And a lot of times we have to look at them and say, but you're not good at it, or you don't like it. And you know what? It doesn't matter whether you should do it, you won't do it.
Right.
We've all been there, right? We don't do the things that we don't feel good about doing. And you have to be really honest with yourself, because otherwise you will be paralyzed in your progress. And by taking stock of your limitations, not just your assets, you start to find out how to fill that in. So when Mishawn and I and our team do an asset analysis and we talk about relationships, the reason why it's so important to look at the relationships in your life in a really aggressive fashion is chances are when you identify what you're not good at or what you don't like or what you don't want to do, there's someone that you have a relationship with or a company that you have a relationship with that's there to do it for you. And it's obvious.
I was actually just about to ask that as well, because, you know, I don't want to stereotype anybody or anything, but, you know, in creative fields, and myself included, there are certain tasks, more medial tasks, that we don't want to do. You know, we get into a kind of a vibe, we get into a headspace, we want to kind of just focus on what we do really, really well. And we don't want to worry about, you know, people ripping off our work, or we don't want to worry about infringements on, you know, any of our creative rights, or what we're developing or what we're working on. And it's hard to be able to, find, well, companies or people that can help you out in those regards.
Yeah.
Sorry, Wendy, but this notion, there's like this myth, this notion that there's all these companies that are run and led by one person who happens to have talent across the board, that they're the creative, they're the CFO, they do operations.
The CTO, the CFO, the CEO.
I mean, that's not how you build a sustainable business. It's not realistic, right? You need to have a team around you that you can trust. And as Wendy was saying, what's essential to success is that people on the team are doing what they do best and what they love to do. Because if you let's say you get up in the morning and you make your to-do list and you have 20 items on your to-do list, you're going to do the stuff that you enjoy doing first, right? You do the stuff that you do well and you get success. You feel successful when you do it. You push down to the bottom of the list and maybe even never get to the stuff that you hate doing. And so it's not uncommon for us to meet with creatives who they don't want to look at numbers. Like, do not show me numbers. My eyes roll back in my head when I see numbers. Don't show me numbers. First thing we say is you need to get someone on your team that loves numbers. You want someone on your team who wakes up every morning and looks at the numbers and says, how do I make these numbers better? How do I crunch the numbers different? How do I adjust things in the business to make the numbers better? That's what you need. There are people, many creatives, who hate sales. They don't want to do sales. They want to create. You have to have someone on your team. All they're driven to do every day is sales. Someone has to wake up and go, how do I make another sale today? How do I bring in more business today? And if you don't have a team where everyone is doing what they are inherently driven to do, then it's really hard to be successful.
I would say it's also difficult though if you're a one-man army. We all have to start somewhere, and it's hard to be able to afford those resources. It's hard to be able to rely on having those resources available to you. I can say that I've been fortunate enough in having some people help me out, behind the scenes and kind of keeping this thing all together. Christy being one of them, who I can't thank enough for helping, with some of the marketing campaigns and things that we've been trying to do with this. But it's difficult as you're one person trying to push your way forward. So, how would you really go about trying to attain those different things? For me, I know that if there's something like when I schedule my day personally, I look at a list of all the things that I really don't want to do, and I actually try and tackle those first and just get them out of the way, because I know that I'm not going to like doing them, and I know they're going to be harder for me and more challenging for me to do, but I know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. So if I just go ahead and hit them.
But what you just said was you want to get them out of the way, right? You want to just,
yes.
So you're better than most because you're getting them done, but what you're doing is you're getting them out of the way. And what you actually need is you need someone who focuses a lot of energy and attention and gets it done really well.
So, Mishawn, I think Geoffrey's concern, though, is we typically think of accessing those alternative resources as being expensive or you have to write a check.
Exactly.
One of the things that we love to do as part of our work is help people form strategic partnerships. Strategic partnerships are really powerful because everyone has a pain point, and it's remarkable how you may not realize when you wake up in the morning, Geoffrey, and you're looking at the things you want to get out of the way, that the things that you are focusing on and should be focusing on is a pain point for someone else in their business. And sometimes the transaction doesn't have to involve a check being written. Sometimes it can be sharing resources, sharing initiatives together, creating a strategic partnership, exploring those relationships. And, it's interesting. If I could say something to the folks out there who are inherently creative and innovative, one of the things that has bothered me my whole life, and I think that's why I've gravitated towards creative individuals, is as we grow up, when we're kids, the sky's the limit. There aren't as many limits. Our behaviors are forgiven. There isn't, don't do that, you shouldn't do this. It's like they're a kid, they're entitled. As we get older, society starts telling us, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, you shouldn't be doing that. But look what happens is creatives inherently have said, I'm not buying into that. I'm going to be creative. I'm going to innovate. But for some reason, they're still convinced by people around them that when it comes to non-creative things, when it comes to business or that no, there's a framework in which you have to work within. And Mishawn and I really believe, and dare I say, there's something called creative lawyering, which sounds like almost illegal, but it's not illegal if it's done well and legally and within the legal constructs. Be creative in the way you go about your endeavors. Don't read manuals that say, first you do this and then you do this. Think outside the box. You think outside the box when you're at your desk with your drawing or your graphics or, tools or your technology tools. You're always thinking outside the box. Think outside the box when it comes to your business.
Yeah. And I mean, we do see that there's been a lot of companies that have come together, especially recently over the last 6 months. There's been a lot of really talented creative people that have basically formed alliances or formed companies and come together. There's a lot of initiatives that are happening just within our industry where different companies are coming together and helping each other, and helping find new ways to be able to create business. Because as the entertainment industry got hit really, really hard when COVID came around. So a lot of people were basically forced to find new creative ways to be able to find those outlets, be able to generate revenue, be able to maintain their life and their lifestyles, because one day they're working, the next day they're not. it's a shock to the system, it's a shock to the people, but it's also a time for being innovative and being creative.
COVID is an incredible opportunity for entrepreneurs and creatives who are looking to build a team that aren't in a position to maybe hire, traditional resources or hire employees, because everything has been, turned upside down, and people who had, jobs may not have jobs anymore. People who had, a way of doing things are completely open to doing things in a manner in which they've never worked before. And so because the world is upside down, because it, everything just got thrown up and now everything's settling, everyone is open to opportunity. I mean, this really is going to be a golden age of innovation. And that goes for people in the more traditional fields as well. Accounting, bookkeeping, law, if you provide services to businesses just as well as the businesses themselves, you have to be open to doing things differently. And so because everything is different, you can't look to the past to figure out how to solve the problems today. And I think it's an opportunity. And I saw one of the questions, and I just want to address it, that it is intimidating. It is intimidating to figure out how to hire attorneys or build a team, but everyone is intimidated. It is very scary to be an entrepreneur. It's very lonely to be an entrepreneur. And so building a team that you can trust and you can rely on and you can be yourself and be authentic with is critical to your success.
Yeah, there's absolutely no doubt about it. And I'm assuming that you were addressing part of Harvey's question or Shannon's question.
Yes.
Within the comments. Yeah. It's a really, he drives a really good point there about creatives and about a lot of people being overwhelmed, by the approaches to business and the protection priorities that are inherent, in manufacturing, legal accountancy. It's something that everybody and all companies combined have all had to come face to face with, I think, especially recently. And some of the questions and the things that I also wanted to try and address today was, some of the ways that people might be able to protect some of those assets that they have been working very hard on. I know I've got a good friend here that's been working on a product, and he's been trying to look at finding different ways to be able to protect some of the IP and some of the things that he's been working on with that. So what in your minds would be some of those ways that those creatives could start to protect some of those assets during these times? Because there's a lot of innovation that's happening right now. There's a lot of people that are creating all kinds of different ideas and concepts, as, again, Shannon is pointing out here, to be able to protect some of those assets that they've been doing. And I don't know, maybe Mishawn, that one might be something that you can start with.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to do, I want to give a really super fast primer on IP, so we know what we're talking about.
In a nutshell, go.
In a nutshell, really, really quick. So there's essentially 4 types of IP. There's patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. The best way that I like to explain it is if you think about a video game, the name of the video game is the trademark. So when you get a trademark, you have the exclusive right to use that name in connection with video games, and no one else could use that name.
Yeah.
The invention of like the secret invention that you created in order to build the video game, the code, the special way that it works, that's a patent. That's the invention. That you have an exclusive right for that invention. The look of the video game, the art of it, the design of it, the character looks, that's the copyright. That's the artistic expression. And then the pricing model, your distribution channel,
your secret sauce that no one else knows, your secret, that's your trade secret.
Got it. So David brought up an interesting question there. Sorry, Wendy, that, how do you protect something that's got 100% visibility to your customers?
So again, in the context of Mishawn laying out the various forms of IP protection, when you think about protecting something visible to your customers, you have to break it down. So I'm not quite sure. Forgive me, I didn't see the name. Was it Shannon that asked the question? Sorry. If you're talking in terms of an idea that's visible to customers, and if you're talking about an idea, or that's very difficult to protect if it's not patentable, because typically you can't protect ideas unless, again, they're patentable, which we won't get into patents. So, but copyright, one of the things that people I think don't fully appreciate is copyright's nothing magical. The minute something hits something tangible, so if you video a choreographed dance routine, it's videoed. If you put pen to paper, you have copyright protection. It's limited because you can't protect the idea embedded in what you've done, but you can protect the way you've drawn it and whatnot. You've written it and whatnot. But there are other ways to protect yourself. Non-disclosure agreements can help you. And I always say, with respect to non-disclosure agreements, they're only as good as the people that you're disclosing the information to, because at the end of the day, you're not going to for non-disclosure. So one of the greatest ways, I think, to protect yourself is know who you're disclosing your information to. Are they trustworthy? That's really important. But non-disclosure agreements, trademarks is a way to protect yourself, because you're building a brand, you're building a way to identify that which you're creating that no one else can use to identify it. So even if you can't protect the idea, you can protect people's access to the idea in their minds by a certain name. I don't know if you're distributing materials, you can limit the way you distribute them. There are practical things you can do, not just distribute things far and wide. You could have password protected websites for access to only certain people. You can trace who's had access to those materials. So I'm not able to answer the question.
I saw a couple questions come through, and so I can address multiple questions with just some basic information. So if you are an employee, the law presumes that what you're creating is owned by your employer, right? If you're creating it within the scope of your employment, the law presumes that your employer owns it. If you're an independent contractor, the law presumes, unless you have something in writing to the contrary, the law presumes that the independent contractor owns what's created. It gets a little bit more complicated if you're creating something based on someone else's IP, right? So it gets complicated. So I saw a bunch of questions and about, you're doing work for someone else and who owns it and stuff like that. And I would suggest that you work it out in advance before you deliver work, before you put the time in, who's going to own it at the end of the day. And if you work it out in advance, if you're going to make a proposal and you're going to propose 3 possibilities and the client's going to pick one of them, who owns the other 2? Do the rights revert back to you? Do you get to use them somewhere else? And then if you are going to do something and the rights are going to transfer to the person who's hiring you, then you may want to carve certain things out. So for example, if you have created an invention, but you've created you've created some artwork on top of the invention, maybe what you're giving to the person hiring you is just the artwork on top of the invention, and you're giving them a license to use the underlying invention underneath it. So that goes back to doing your asset inventory and really understanding what all the assets are, because each type of intellectual property requires different steps for protection. And so it's critical in terms of when you talk to someone about creating something together. If you talk about someone who might hire you, who is hiring you after you've been hired, in all those scenarios, you want to work out in advance and in writing who's going to own it.
And I think in the collaboration context, it's really critical, because one of the things we see a lot in our practice is people don't understand that even if they pay for something, even if it feels like they just hired their neighbor to do a drawing and they paid it, in the absence of something in writing that transfers ownership from that neighbor to you, that neighbor owns it. Or if you're working on something together, in the absence of really identifying how you're allocating ownership, you own it equally. But there are ways to also place where the value is going to be maximized of that which you're creating. So to Mishawn's point about the artwork versus the underlying invention, we always like to say to our clients, the people who control it and own it should be the ones that can actually do the most with it. Otherwise, it just sits on a shelf. So, why would I transfer everything to you when you're only going to use a portion of it? The rest is just going to sit there. Why don't I transfer what you need and what you can really fully actualize and monetize? And then Mishawn's point, just license the rest and let me monetize it for myself. And that's the beautiful thing about IP and intangible property, is you can slice and dice it like that.
Yeah, I think that might actually cover a lot of what David's question was there. David's been working on a product that is reliant on another product. So he's built a unique platform that sits and lives on top of this other platform that's already been built. But he's got some very unique ways of doing things. And then that IP basically gets exposed back to the public. He needs to find creative ways to be able to protect some of that custom development and that time that he's put into developing that product.
So there's public facing, there's the part that the public sees, and then there's the part that the public doesn't see, right? Mm-hmm. So the part that the public sees is probably more copyrightable, right? Because it's the expression, it's the design, it's the user interface, and it doesn't matter if the public sees copyrights. Copyrights are public, right? That's the point. It's songs, it's movies, it's TV shows, it's artwork. And so you want to register the copyright. The Copyright Office is very user-friendly. You do not have to be a lawyer to register something with the Copyright Office. I recommend, if you've created something, it's relatively inexpensive. The filing fee, I believe, is $65 for a copyright. You go onto the Copyright Office website, the forms are there. The Copyright Office will walk you through it. It's really simple. File your copyrights.
So I just saw a question regarding leverage. Absolutely, there's skewed leverage. There's no doubt. Part of the reason I love representing the part of the ecosystem I represent is because I like representing people that feel like they don't have leverage against the big guys. First of all, ask the question. Assert your position. A lot of times our clients are afraid. They don't even want to go there because they're afraid they're going to scare off work. And I will tell you that if someone is scared off by you protecting your interests, you really, really, really don't want to work with them. And I would say 95% of the time, 99% of the time, and I'm not exaggerating, we don't get a negative feedback. In other words, if you say I need this protection, or they talk to you. They don't just run away. So definitely assert your position, and then it becomes a cost-benefit analysis. Sometimes you're going to be willing to give rights away at a fraction of what they're worth, or not retain ownership because you need the job, and what you're creating is not an asset that you're going to build your business on. Other times you have to do the cost-benefit analysis and say, you know what, for what they're willing to pay me and the value of that which I'm creating, I'm actually better off bartending for a while, or babysitting or mowing someone's lawn than giving this away because it's too valuable. And I think just really valuing your contribution and believing that you can, even if you feel like the little guy, is super important. More often than not, you will be respected and you will be deemed as someone that really knows their worth. It will not scare the other side away, even if they're the big guy.
Wendy, I think you've made a very, very solid point there. about what you're willing to give out there, what you're willing to put out there, and what you need to retain and what you need to protect. And I think a lot of people don't actually evaluate that. They don't look at it. There's some people that'll just put things right out into the open, and then they'll look at it and then they'll come back, months later and go, crap, I should have not done that. I lit something out that I shouldn't have done. And it's hard to find that balance, I think, on, what is good to put out there and what is good to help kind of promote your business, promote who you are, and what you need to hold back and what you need to, contain or you need to cherish and hold on to.
It's really hard. I think, the other thing we find is that there is a tendency for people to be too precious. And at a certain point, if you're too precious, you're not going to expose yourself to people who are interested in helping. And it's one of those things, which is why I go back to a contract is really meaningless. It's not meaningless. I shouldn't say that, but it's only worth the person that you're on the other side of. And one of the things I always encourage my clients to do is engage in the process, even a little bit. Don't just sign stuff. Engage a little bit in a courtship, because you learn about the person that you're going to be in business with. And it's amazing what happens in the course of contract negotiations, in the course of just talking through things, because you start to get the willies with some people. And if you're getting the willies at the contract stage, you're going to get the willies when you're actually in development, big time. So because it's a good
stage.
Exactly.
So basically you're saying run with your heart. Do what your gut says.
No.
Oh, see, this is where this is where, well, you guys have to know we have superhero names, and I'm Captain Can Do, and Mishawn's Guardian Girl, because I'm gut and she's head. Okay, it's good balance. And I will tell you, it is good balance. There are streets that Mishawn never would have crossed were it not for me going, dear God, just cross the street. I would have been hit by massive trucks many times in our working together, were it not for her saying, there's a truck coming. So there is a balance, but I think sometimes we don't listen to our intuition as much as we should. And I think it's a good indicator. If things don't feel right when you're talking to someone at the head of a relationship, if they're getting squirrely, or if they're getting cheap, or if they are not valuing your contribution, it's not going to get any better.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not going to get.
It's about going through the process of expressing your concerns, understanding their concerns, actually talking through the hard issues. Who's going to own it? How am I going to get paid? What's going to happen if things don't work out? It's the process of going through those hard questions that's really critical. The contract is actually important, both in terms of going through the process and having written contract. Hopefully you sign the contract, you put it in the drawer, and you never look at it again, but it's there for when everything goes wrong.
Oh, and the other thing I want to say about a contract that I want folks to know, and forgive me if this seems oversimplified, but most contracts do not actually need to be in writing. Okay, now I'm not suggesting that's what should be done, but I want folks to know that you can have a legally binding contract in the absence of a writing. When you go to get your haircut, you don't sign something that says I'm going to pay you at the end of my haircut. You have a contract, okay? It's about evidence. It's about he said, she said. When the SHIT hits the fan, it becomes a question of, what do I have to show what the fundamental agreement was between us? And so the more you can identify the fundamental agreement, the easier it's going to be later when you meet these points of differences. But if you're sitting down at the head of a project and you don't have funds to engage an attorney, do not let that stop you from writing something down. We talk about putting things on a napkin, because at the end of the day, a napkin is better than no napkin.
Yeah.
Email counts. Email is a written agreement. A text is a written agreement. So also keep that in mind, right? If you agree to something by email or text, or you say something, those are binding written obligations.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wanted to kind of go back and address something that Keith was saying before, about some of these companies and owning the rights to the things that you did. I got burnt by that a long time ago when I was doing, production design. I designed, a lot of different designs and came up with a lot of different concepts for clients. And so, there was one particular instance where my design was basically stolen and mounted by a completely different company, and I couldn't do anything about it. It was just ideas that I ended up pitching directly to the client, and the client went off elsewhere, and it got taken from me, and I didn't get anything from that. But I learned a very strong lesson from that. And from that point, I started developing contracts for my customers saying that I still own the rights to this material, and everything that I'm going to be speaking to you about is my property. So if you're going to be using this under, legal obligation, then you have to pay me my fee to be able to utilize this property that I'm creating for you. Because it's property that I'm creating for you to use. It's not property that I'm creating for you to own.
That's a really good thought, Geoffrey. Is the other thing I would impress upon folks out there is whenever you make a proposal, have terms and conditions that are yours that you attach to it. And you can do that readily. Just get them done, and then every time you make a proposal, attach it, because it lets the other side know right away what the expected rules of the game are. And if there's ever a situation where you wind up not going to contract, formal contract and whatnot, that forms a binding agreement that you've told them the basis on which you're delivering whatever it is you're delivering. They didn't push back. They accepted it. And that way you have some form of protection. Proposals without any terms and conditions, not a good idea.
The other thing that you want to be careful of is you don't want, if someone takes your idea, you don't want them to say, we didn't have a contract that I would pay you if I used it. You were presenting it to me to see if I might want to hire you in the future. So you want to be really clear about your relationship.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Mishawn. Shannon just stated in there too, if you have an idea that the world needs to know but has intellectual property value, the rush is to push that message, especially from the point of view of getting momentum. It can be a driver. But that leaves you also open to having those ideas taken away. How can you protect yourself while trying to push forward with that momentum? And I think that might just go back to what we were speaking about before, was exposing those little bits that are kind of the overlayers that give people a taste and can help you drive that momentum forward, but still refraining from letting go of the secret sauce and the underlying IP that you've created to be able to deliver that momentum or deliver that content pushing forward.
Yeah. And it depends what the IP is, right? And so it depends how you can protect it. Sometimes it's really hard to protect IP. And so the way that you protect it is you develop the brand and you associate whatever it is that you're putting out into the world in association with the brand. And so it's really important to figure out exactly what type of IP it is. Should you be, because for a patent, there's a rush to the patent office. Whoever files first wins. So if it's a patent, you better rush out to the patent office and file as soon as you can. If it's a copyright, you can put it out in the world, because once it's fixed in a tangible medium, you own it. Trademark rights stem from use. The more you use it, the stronger your rights are. So you don't have to worry about doing something first. Definitely file your trademark registration. That's really important. Which you can also do yourself if you want. It's more complicated than a copyright, but you can also do that yourself. It's the United States Patent and Trademark Office. File your trademarks, but trademark rights stem from use. The only intellectual property that requires secrecy is a trade secret.
Well, let me modify that though. Under patent law, you have a certain period of time once something's become public that you have to file the patent in. Otherwise, yeah, I think it's 12 months. Mishawn's maybe disagreeing with me. You can't publicize something. And are you questioning me, Mishawn, or are you looking at a question? You look confused. Oh, did we lose Mishawn?
No, she's still here.
I can't hear anything.
Oh, she can't hear anything. Anyhow, to the folks out there, once you let the public know of something that's patentable, you have only a certain period of time in which you have to file the patent. You lose your right to file the patent if it becomes public after, I think it's 12 months. So once you start promoting something and you think it's patentable, make sure that within that 12-month period of time, you filed your patent.
I think the other thing that's probably good to mention, as Mishawn tries to maybe figure out, Mishawn, just so that you know, at the very bottom, there's an area that has cam and mic settings. There's a little settings icon. You should be able to click on that and then maybe troubleshoot your audio through there if you can't hear
This is awesome. Now I can talk trash about her. Okay, so
Well,
now
also
that
because
she
we're
can't
going
hear
up to
her,
wrap
let
up,
me
like-
tell you, everyone out there, this whole partnership thing, ain't working out. No, just kidding. Kidding.
I also
Oh,
wanted to
poor
mention
Mishawn.
something really quickly about jurisdiction, because there's also jurisdiction rights to those patents, to those trade secrets, to those trademarks from country to country, and in where you're filing and where you're working. So I know that there are different rights based on the countries that you're filing in. There's different ways that those filings can be utilized within the countries. I know that trademarks in a lot of cases actually have to be filed for the different countries that you're working in. So
Yeah, it can get expensive. We like to do an analysis of where it's worthwhile to file. International patents can get extremely expensive. International trademarks, it can really add up. And then they're interrelated oftentimes in terms of what you file domestically and then where you can file internationally and things like that. The other thing is you have to ask yourself what the value of certain international filings are, because certain jurisdictions, I was totally talking trash about you, Mishawn.
I mean, I don't know what's going to
Now
happen.
I can hear. I haven't heard you in a few minutes, but now I can hear you. So stop talking about it.
But there are certain jurisdictions where you file and it's kind of meaningless because there's no rule of law, right? Or there's minimal rule of law. And then the question is, what's the point if you can't enforce your rights? So, again, not to overcomplicate things, but, it has to be very strategic where you place your resources and where you want to file and protect yourself.
So I'd say then the good piece of advice to most people would be to file in the country that you're predominantly or you're mainly doing business in.
For sure. And then
And also do your research and your homework as to what those protectable rights would be in the country that you are living or filing in.
Correct. Doing business in a country where the rule of law is questionable is never a good idea, right? And then also there are protocols under various intellectual property regimes where you can file one filing and it covers many jurisdictions, and it helps drive down your costs of filing and things like that. So again, I'm getting a little
I don't know if I
arcane.
missed anything, but like trademarks and patents are territorial. So wherever you actually want to use, your rights, wherever you want to exercise your rights for patents and trademarks, you're going to actually have to file in each of those countries.
Well, can I modify that, Mishawn? Wherever you want to protect your rights, not wherever you want to use. So you can
Correct.
use it, but you just may not be able to protect it, get the full value of the law without registering them. But again, not to harsh out on certain jurisdictions, the registration is only as worthwhile as your ability to actually get recourse under the law. So, there are some jurisdictions where it's not worth the price, the paper it's written on, from my vantage point.
I think that's some really good advice. Well, ladies, I think we've hit our time. I really want to thank you both for coming on the show today. It's been absolutely wonderful having you here. So for those who want to get in touch with Wendy and Mishawn, please reach out to Wendy at Heimann at Heimann. Sorry, Wendy.
Can I,
Heimann.
Geoffrey, can I say one thing to everyone out there? Because I know for people right now, the COVID situation, it's been devastating. We've seen so many people lose their jobs and their worlds have been turned upside down. And all I can tell you is it's all right now about survival, because we are seeing such pent up demand and pent up capital. We're being told that the capital markets they're holding back. And so if people can get through this, there will be opportunity. So try to stay positive through this. We're not trying to minimize this situation. It's been devastating for people, but we will get through this. And when people get through this, there will be a tremendous opportunity.
And Wendy, I think that's going to be a great segue to introduce my next week's guest speaker, who's going to be coming on the show. It's Sean Wargo from VIXA, and he is the Senior Director for Market Intelligence there. So we're going to be talking to him about some of the insights of how the industries have been doing from an analytical perspective, from a business perspective, and kind of hopefully give some insights as to how these industries are doing and maybe some forecasts, at least financially, on some of these different market segments and how they're going to be trending going forward. So make sure that you all kind of come back to us next week and check that out, because that's going to be an interesting conversation, hopefully spread some hope and and some good thoughts into everybody's minds. And as I say to every single one of you, thanks for watching and stay ahead of the curve. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
It's been great having you here.
Thank you for having us.